Ja, hallo zusammen. Es geht weiter mit dem zweiten Buch in unserer Reihe zur Souveränität. Jetzt hier speziell mit der direkten Hypnose. Wir kamen gerade von Erickson, der uns erstmal über die indirekte Hypnose aufgeklärt hat, was da für Mechanismen am Werk sind mit dem Unterbewusstsein. Und jetzt etwas tiefer rein sozusagen, eben über auch das Überkommen von Schwellen, denke ich mal hier, sich ein bisschen klarer zu werden. Also Erickson hat ja viele schwammige Formulierungen, aber auch wirklich gewiefte Techniken, da Beziehungen herzustellen, erstmal in die Entspannung reinzugehen, legt viel Wert auf Vorbereitung. Und ich bin gespannt, wie Elman das sieht. Also wir sind hier sozusagen auf dem Weg in die Tiefe dessen, was geschieht in unserem Bewusstsein, unserer Psychologie, wenn wir unseren Fokus auf etwas richten. Und wollen natürlich dann im Folgenden auch herausfinden, was in unserem Körper geschieht, um einfach zu verstehen, wie wir eigentlich unsere Wahrnehmung strukturieren und eben im letzten Schritt auch strukturieren können. Das heißt erstmal auf der körperlichen Ebene, was passiert da eigentlich, wie können wir uns selbst da korrekt wahrnehmen, um auch einfach im Fluss zu bleiben, im Kontakt mit unserem Selbst, denn das nehme ich als signifikanten Teil der Souveränität war, also wirklich ein gesundes, präsentes Körpergefühl, eine Kohärenz zwischen all meinen Ebenen, meinem Ausdruck, aber auch meinem Gefühl im Inneren hervorrufen zu können und halten zu können. Das ist, denke ich, wirklich ein besonderer Teil dessen, was Authentizität irgendwo repräsentiert. Und Authentizität ist ja wirklich das, was eigentlich die Menschen, die wirklich leben, die wirklich etwas tun und lieben, ausstrahlen und auch wirklich irgendwo Wiedererkennungswert hat für die eben sich da auch selbst wiederfinden in anderen. Also diese Selbstwirksamkeit, diese Strahlkraft mit wirklich Gesundheit und Stabilität zu füllen, das ist hier irgendwo das Ziel. Und ich bin eben gespannt, wie das hier erstmal in der Wahrnehmung, also dem Bewusstsein, dem Unterbewusstsein, dann im nächsten Schritt eben aber auch im Körper funktioniert, wirklich auf kleinster Organisationsebene, in Zellebene, aber auch einfach organisatorisch, welche Schleifen, welche Muster können wir da ausmachen, um mit diesem geballten Wissen dann eben auch den Transfer zu machen und noch weitere Erkenntnisse zu vereinfachen, das heißt auch in die Nutzung zu kommen, im dritten Schritt dieser Phase, in der ich mich hier befinde, die ich durchgehe mit dem Erarbeiten eines Handbuchs der Souveränität. Das wird dann eben die Stilistik und speziell der Ausdruck, die Verkörperung in der Außenwelt zu sein, auf Basis eben dieser Grundlage. Also, noch stehe ich hier ziemlich am Anfang, gehe sozusagen den zweiten Schritt. Ich freue mich unglaublich, dem Dave Elman auf der Spur zu sein, einem der größten Hypnotiseure, signifikanten Beitragsleister, sozusagen ein Schlüsselschritt in der Handhabbarmachung des psychischen Potenzials des Menschen. Hier schauen wir uns jetzt erstmal die Kapitelübersicht an. Also es geht jetzt weiter auf Englisch. Das heißt hier Introduction, erstmal wird hier die Bühne aufgemacht und dargestellt, dass wir uns also viel mit Misconceptions, Reasons und Beginnings befassen. Also Anfänge und Vorbereitung, Erwartung, das spielt hier auch wieder eine große Rolle. Dann gehen wir mal die Kapitel durch, insgesamt 23 an der Zahl. Später praktische Sachen, Allergien, Depressionen. Und wir beginnen hier erstmal mit interessanten Findings, also Sachen, die man mal gehört haben sollte. Dann, wie man überhaupt Hypnose studieren sollte, kriegen wir eine Anleitung, also Lernen zum Lernen, sozusagen Lernen zu lernen. Hier geht es dann aber auch direkt los mit der Praxis Handshake-Technik, also wirklich fokussiert auf eine Technik, Instruktion, Two-Finger-Eye-Close-Method. Okay, hier, wie wird man Hypnose als Beitrag oder als Unterstützung für chemische Anästhesie sozusagen einsetzen können. Also hier ist es wirklich sehr genau definiert und hier zum Beispiel auch sehr interessant. Ich sehe schon, da geht es darum, den State kennenzulernen. Das ist ja ein besonderer State, der sozusagen ausgemacht wurde, auch als Phase eines hypnotisierten Menschen. Okay, und dann hier, wie gesagt, am Ende praktische Beispiele. Ich bin gespannt, wir fangen einfach an mit dem ersten Kapitel. Let's go. Oder beziehungsweise wahrscheinlich erstmal der Einführung. Introduction, Misconceptions, Reasons and Beginnings. Despite the efforts of scientific writers and researchers, hypnosis has been wearing a cloak of mysticism for centuries. The very term hypnosis, derived from a Greek root word meaning sleep, is misleading. Hypnosis is related to sleep as night is to day and is no more like it than night is like the day. If you will put aside all preconceived notions and examine hypnosis clinically, you will find that it doesn't look or behave as you thought it would. The way it does behave makes the phenomenon a tremendously valuable medical tool, though misconceptions continually hamper or prevent its use entirely. The realization of this potential use in healing and of the damage done by misunderstanding and downright misinformation prompted me to write this book. I will detail my reasons further in chapter 1, but I wish to emphasize immediately the need for hypnotic knowledge and unbiased research if medicine is to take advantage of a great corrective force, the power of the human mind. It is my purpose in this text to impart valuable data to doctors and also to make an understanding of hypnosis available to the interested laity. This is the only way to remove the mystic cloak. You will therefore find no arcane terminology or esotericism introduced here. I have been teaching hypnosis to medical men for years, and I have found that many of them seem to think they can become expert hypnotists after a few classroom and practice sessions. Since there is really no such thing as a hypnotist, this is obviously impossible. As a practitioner employing this tool, all you can ever do is to show a patient how to go over the hurdle from a normal waking or sleeping state into the peculiar state of mind known as hypnosis. You won't hypnotize him. He will hypnotize himself. This means that those of us using suggestions wield no power over any subject. It means that there is nothing to do that you can't learn to do hypnosis. Okay, hier stimmt er also schon mal mit Erickson überein. Jeder hypnotisiert sich selbst. A more accurate term than hypnotist is hypnotic operator. As the operator, you teach the subject how to achieve the trance state or other states, which we will go into at a proper time. And then, if the subject is willing, you stimulate his imagination, acting to speak as a dream pilot. It is pleasant to know that you can pilot almost anyone's imagination, stimulating more enjoyable, more intense thoughts than those usually deemed possible. But again, do not confuse this piloting ability with power. I stress the words if the subject is willing, because consent is imperative. You cannot impart a suggestion unless the subject is willing to take it. At all times and in all degrees of hypnosis, the subject has complete power of selectivity. He therefore reacts only to the suggestions that are reasonable and pleasing to him. You may have seen hypnotic demonstrations in which a subject performed outlandish antics. The fact remains that such an object chooses to perform these antics. There have doubtlessly been times in your life when you experienced outlandish dreams. The odd behavior you may have witnessed on the part of a hypnotized person was merely a similar dream induced by the operator by a dream pilot, and odd or not, it seemed reasonable and pleasing to the subject, or he would have rejected the suggestions. Most modern books of hypnosis stress that the hypnotized subject is in rapport with the operator. As a rule, they neglect to add that he is also in rapport with himself, or he can give himself auto-suggestions and with the whole world. Therefore, the subject may easily take reasonable and pleasing suggestions from persons other than the operator, unless the operator has first implanted a negative reaction to such suggestions. Also, bear in mind the fact that just another subject is amenable to suggestions. He is not going to let anyone control him. I repeat that in every stage of hypnosis, the subject is in control and can select the suggestions he will accept. If the crisis of an unwanted suggestion arises, the subject will either arouse himself from the trance state or continue in it, but simply refuse to act on the suggestion. Under hypnosis, a person has control of more than his selectivity or willpower. He is in control of all his faculties except one. He can hear, see, feel, smell, taste, speak. Though he may sometimes look unconscious, he is completely aware and can therefore cooperate. The single exception to this control is what I call the critical faculty. Okay, so here we are very technical and come with the first realization that we have never heard. The critical faculty makes a difference. If you have him, give him a suggestion which pleases him and which seems emotionally and morally reasonable to him, he will accept it despite the fact that under ordinary circumstances, he might suggest anesthesia, erasing pain. Under ordinary circumstances, he might consider it an impossible suggestion. For example, you can suggest anesthesia, erasing pain without a chemical agent. Or you can induce total recall, even back to as early an age as, say, 3 years, and even when the subject ordinarily has a poor memory. In regressing a patient during hypnosis, you lead the mental process still a step further, inducing abreaction. This is the reliving of a past experience rather than mere recall. Okay, so if you give him a suggestion which pleases him and which seems emotionally and morally reasonable, he will accept it, despite the fact that under ordinary circumstances he might consider it as an impossible suggestion. Okay, so it must please him, and there must be, in other words, circumstances that are not ordinary, is what we read here. And that's connected to the critical faculty. Interesting. Okay, move on. The suspension of the critical faculty does not contradict the statement that the patient is in complete control of himself and has full selectivity. He accepts such suggestion because he is pleasing. It is good for him because it is pleasing. But the critical faculty, the disbelief that such fantastic feats are possible, is bypassed in hypnosis. So in other words, the belief that something is pleasing to a subject is stronger than the critical faculty that would otherwise decide that it is impossible. That's what's written here, and that's what's evident through different examples of hypnosis, where hypnosis is, for example, really practiced as a tool to alleviate pain. What's happening already? Let's understand more. To state it another way, in hypnosis, the body and mind are equally suggestible, operating as a harmonious unit. Hypnosis has an effect on the unconscious as well as on the conscious mind, and on the autonomic nervous system too. When you pilot a person into the suggestible state and provide him with pleasing dreams, his sensation upon waking will be physical as well as mental. Having had a pleasant experience, he will feel refreshed and invigorated. These general truths notwithstanding, every individual reacts differently under suggestion. To use hypnosis successfully, you must be able to respond to a variety of reactions, and your knowledge of the phenomenon should therefore be profound. If a doctor is to help a patient, he should not let himself be taken by surprise. No one can learn hypnosis thoroughly by merely observing it. You must experience it yourself to know how different it is from the descriptions generally found in this book. You will find hypnosis a pleasant state, and as you learn more about it, you will not only wish to experience it for yourself, but you will also be able to hypnotize yourself. There is no such thing as not being hypnotizable. Since selectivity prevails in the hypnotic state, and the law of self-preservation will not let a subject accept a harmful suggestion, no one has ever been injured by hypnosis. Numerous hypnotizers have been formulated to the effect that a subject might be induced to hurt himself, knowingly or unknowingly, or might be fooled into committing a crime. Yet there is no case on record of any such happening. We have conducted thousands of tests, and in all cases, one of two things happens when an improper suggestion is given. The subject either reacts the suggestion or completely terminates the trance state. Okay, that's repetition. I repeat this fact because it is so important to the acceptance of hypnosis as a valuable self-medical tool. The three requisites of hypnosis are: 1. The consent of the subject; 2. Communication between the operator and the subject; and 3. Freedom from fear or reluctance on the subject's part to trust the operator. Since these are the only requisites, it is obvious that those authors are wrong who say that any particular technique, fixation for instance, is the only reliable way to introduce trance. Actually, there is no limit to the number of techniques that can be used to trigger the desired response. You might say that there is one way in which you cannot hypnotize a person once you know how to utilize suggestion. That there is no way in which you cannot hypnotize a person when you know how to utilize suggestion. It can be seen from the foregoing, all of which will be treated in detail at the proper points in this work, that there is a great deal of misinformation in what has been written about hypnosis. In view of this, I feel that I must answer here questions the reader may have as to my qualifications for writing about the subject and the basis for my interest in it. The first question is fortunately easy to answer. I have been teaching hypnosis to medical men, physicians, dentists, and podiatrists for more than a dozen years. I do not hold a medical degree and therefore do not administer treatments to patients, although at the physician's request and with the physician in attendance, I have hypnotized thousands of patients and associated with doctors with such hypnotic instruments as hypnoanalysis and deep anesthesia. I have delivered lectures to members of hospital staffs and have also lectured to many thousands of doctors in private practice. I aided in the demonstration of a delivery without chemical anesthesia for a medical film. And I could amount my successful students many eminent doctors, including the heads of several state medical societies. I recount these facts not as a bid for credit or recognition of any kind, but so that readers will be able to study this book without the hindrance of wondering whether the author, as in so many books on this subject, is in reality an authority. The second question, the original basis for my interest in the subject, cannot be answered in a single paragraph. I have had an intense involvement with the subject since early childhood, and it probably stemmed from an incident that took place when I was about 6 years old. My father, who was a student of hypnosis, had by that time already told me a good deal about it. Then one day he took me to visit a family living a few blocks from us in Fargo, North Dakota. A young girl in this family had a pronounced stutter, but when my father hypnotized her, the stutter vanished. Then, when the trance was terminated, her speech difficulty immediately returned. My interest in hypnosis was awakened, although it was not until much later that I learned how stutters can be permanently corrected by means of suggestion. An even more important incident occurred in 1908, when I was 8 years old and my father was 42. He had become acquainted with one of the great hypnotists of the era, a master performer who had a reputation for performing astounding feats. This man learned that my father was dying of cancer and was suffering intense pain. He came to our house, went into the sick room, and in a few minutes alleviated this pain. I had not been allowed to go into the room until then. But after the hypnotist came out, I was permitted to enter. Just before this, I had been sitting near the doctor and had heard my father groaning. Now I went in and he played with me. It was the last time he ever played with me, but so far as I know, he was absolutely pain-free for some time after the hypnotist's visit. A few weeks later, he was dead. I have never forgotten that for a while before his death he was given relief that had not been deemed possible by doctors. Of course, I didn't understand at the time how many other medical medical uses hypnosis has, but my interest in the subject became and remained profound. Soon afterward, I attended a performance given by the same hypnotist, and he allowed me to assist him. He told the subjects on stage that I would shake hands with them, and that as I did so, each one would go into a deep state of hypnosis. I shook their hands, and it worked. Afterward, I tried to produce the same effect, without success, of course, on my mother, my brothers and sisters, my schoolmates. And at first I couldn't understand my failure, but I began reading every book on the subject which I could find in the library. The only point on which all these books seem to agree was that fixation could be used reliably to hypnotize. You must have the subject stare at a light or a brilliant object that authors instructed for a period lasting anywhere between 3 minutes to 2 hours in order to pronounce a trance. Since neither my father nor the hypnotist had used a light, this dogmatic statement puzzled me. I tried staring at a light myself, but only made one important discovery. Looking at a light for an hour can be rather boring. All the light achieved was to tire my eyes. Perhaps I thought this was necessary for fast, deep hypnosis, so I asked my own eye doctor about it. He explained that the human eye seems to prevent the eyes from following the natural habit of leaping and darting. The muscles quickly tire. As a demonstration, he placed his hand just above my eyes and very close to my forehead. Then he brought his hand down slowly, instructing me to keep watching it as he did so. By the time his hand was under my chin, I realized that my eyes felt very sleepy. Now I knew how to tire a person's eyes quickly without using fixation. This, I believe, was the birth of rapid conditioning in hypnosis. By adopting this doctor's demonstration as part of my technique, I would do in a few seconds what the fixation light did in 2 or 3 hours. You will find that this hand-lowering technique consistently speeds hypnotic induction. Okay, first technique, hand-lowering technique. We have to mark this. Great. I began to have many successes in my attempts to hypnotize friends, adults, as well as children. I didn't give up experimenting until during my early teens, the father of a girl whom I had dated told me not to see her again. He had heard that a hypnotic subject could be seduced by the operator. This bit of misinformation could, I calculated, make me the least popular boy in Fargo. So I laid hypnosis aside and did not return to it for many years. However, I had already learned some valuable facts that were not generally known. Hypnosis could be used to alleviate intractable pain. It could be produced almost instantaneously. The greatest obstacle in obtaining the state was any fear of the part of the subject, even a fear at a level below consciousness. Even today, many textbooks assert that a certain percentage of people will be found unhypnotizable, when the truth is that the removal of fear permits any person to be hypnotized. The other discoveries described above were likewise not to be found in the writings of experts. When I returned to the subject as an adult, I tried to go on learning by maintaining the same open-minded attitude of experimentation, accepting no theories or dogmas without the strongest supporting clinical evidence. Such an attitude, I believe, is essential for anyone who wishes to participate in the improvement of the medical arts. Perhaps I am merely rewarding the old saw that experience is the best teacher. At any rate, I insist that my students learn by watching and doing, rather than by only listening to lectures or reading unsubstantial theories. I have attempted to incorporate the same principle into the writing of this book. In discussing any given technique, finding, theory, or application of hypnosis, there is at last excerpt, usually more from a tape-recorded hypnotic session involving the operator, the patient, and attending doctors. Confidences and identities have, of course, been withheld where ethics so dictated, but the editing has been slight, while extraneous material that necessarily intruded on tapes now and then, entrances or exits of doctors in an audience, coughs, statements of addresses and names and such have been pared away. The participants are permitted to speak as they spoke. If a person used a colloquialism or a bit of bad grammar, it has only been changed on those occasions, calling for clarification of meaning. After all, a person's personality, emotions, and responses are expressed in the words he actually uses, not in a technician's or grammarian's alterations. Bracketed descriptions of nonverbal actions or communications, such as patients nods or refuses to answer or begins to smile, coughs and such, are included in the manner of stage directions. This is done first for the sake of clarity, and second, and more important, because the observations of reaction is vital to the success of medical application of hypnosis. Having made the introductory remarks that I think are important to proper study of the subject, it is time to begin finding out about hypnosis. I have only one note to add before launching the study proper. My heartfelt thanks to the thousands of doctors who have been my students, just as I have been their teachers. They have taught me. End of the introduction. Let's see again what chapter 1 has to offer soon.